Inside an old, abandoned-looking building, a man was tied to a chair. The room was silent, only his faint groans echoed in the air. Suddenly, a stranger started pouring gasoline all around him. Then he lit a gasoline-soaked rag and threw it into a corner of the building. The fire began to spread slowly, but the man overlooked one thing. There were gas cylinders lying right there. The moment the fire touched them, a loud explosion shook the place, and that stranger got caught in the blast himself. Sometime later, when firefighters put out the fire and went inside, they found that same stranger badly burned. He was rushed to the nearest hospital. Dr. Yoon and Lee Yu-jong did everything they could. Eventually, they managed to save him, but because his lungs were filled with smoke, his voice would never be the same again. When the doctor asked for his name, the man said, "Park Jae-young." Hearing this, Lee Yu-jong was lost in thought. Maybe she had some kind of connection with this man. On the other side, we see a moneylender who was after a man named Park. Park had taken a loan from the moneylender and lost it all in the stock market. But for months now, he hadn't returned the money. The moneylender dragged him to his hideout. There, a doctor was removing someone's body parts. Seeing that, Park was horrified. He started begging for his life. He could see his end coming closer. Finally, the moneylender listened to him and gave him 1 month's time. The next day, while Park was secretly searching through his own home, he found an insurance paper belonging to his dad. It said that if he had an accident or died, the claim amount would be 500 million won. Reading that, Park's eyes lit up. That much money could wipe out all his debt. But now the real question was, how do you get your own father out of the way? The next day at work, he saw a Chinese worker, Xing, getting fired. Xing begged, but when the supervisor didn't listen to him, he snapped. In anger, he pulled a knife on the guy and yelled, "You're firing me just because I'm Chinese." The mix of anger and desperation in his eyes made Park realize this was the guy who could do his job. So taking advantage of Xing's situation, he made him an offer to get rid of his own father. The plan was to hit his dad with a car so it would look like an accident. Xing agreed, but he wanted 30% of the insurance claim. Eventually, they shook on the deal. Like every night, Park's dad was walking home late from church. That's when Xing hit him hard with a four-wheeler. Meanwhile, his son stayed up all night, waiting for the good news. But there was no word from Xing. By the next afternoon, his phone was still switched off. Then Park got a call from the police station. His dad had died, and they needed him to come to the hospital to identify the body. Before heading out, Park pretended to cry in the bathroom, then went to the hospital. When he saw the body was indeed his dad's, he shed a few fake tears in front of the officer. And just like that, a son got rid of his own father. But it wasn't that easy. What came next shook him to the core. Turns out there was a witness. Park's dad and Miss Kim used to go to the same church every day. That evening, while they were walking back from church, Kim saw the whole thing. The driver was clearly trying to hit Park's dad on purpose. Before Kim could call the cops, the guy realized she had seen him, so he ran off. That's not all. His dad's body was found by a vlogger near a hillside. Someone had dragged it there and buried it. This wasn't just some random hit and run, which meant everything Park had done had gone to waste. On the other side, a couple was driving somewhere. Joo-yeon, for some reason, got all flirty and suddenly started getting romantic with Sang-hun. Right then, someone slammed into their car. Sang-hun, being a doctor, rushed out to check on the guy, but it was too late. The man had already stopped breathing. Now they were in big trouble because Sang-hun had been drinking and driving. On top of that, he was scared their affair would become public. So instead of calling the cops, he started getting rid of the body. Joo-yeon didn't want to go along with it at all. While they were arguing, they noticed a junk collector standing by the roadside. He had seen everything. Before the guy could jump on his bike and get away, Sang-hun rushed at him. In the scuffle, the man got hit on the head and passed out. Sang-hun dragged him into the car too, and they headed toward the hills. Just as they reached the hillside, Kyok-nam, the junk collector, regained consciousness and started yelling. He was terrified Sang-hun was going to kill him too. That's when something clicked in Sang-hun's mind. He quickly transferred 1 million won into Kyok-nam's account, basically a bribe to bury the body and keep his mouth shut. Kyok-nam didn't say no, and the two of them buried Park's father's body together in the hills. It seemed like the mess was cleaned up, but then Kyok-nam came back asking for 20 million won to keep the secret. Sang-hun freaked out, but by next morning, he paid him off to make it all go away. He also pulled out the dash cam's memory card and tossed it in the trash with his clothes and other stuff. He tried his best to erase every trace, but even after being that careful, someone was already on his tail. Sang-hun's wife hired a private detective to catch him cheating, and now that same detective is after him. The next day, Kyok-nam showed up at Sang-hun's clinic again, demanding 30 million won, and this time, Sang-hun was in shock. This guy was ridiculously greedy. On the other hand, Park had only 16 days left, and he was stuck in an insurance claim mess. As long as the investigation wasn't complete, he wouldn't be getting anything. And on top of that, Jink was making things worse with his 150 million won demand. Jink threatened Park, saying, "If you don't give me my 150 million won, this tape goes to the police." The tape had a full recording of their deal. Park said, "You were supposed to leave the body right there on the street. If the accident doesn't look legit, how will the company give a claim?" But Jink didn't care about any of that. He just wanted his money. Before leaving, he casually mentioned that after the accident, Park's dad was still alive and saw Jink's face. If he had left him alive on the road, Jink could have gotten caught too. That's why he took Park's dad up a mountain and buried him there. A detective watching from a distance had been silently tracking them. He followed Jink all the way and managed to sneak the recording device out of his pocket. But Jink was too sharp. He had been on the detective's tail from the start. And then, Jink took care of him for good. But now Jink was in trouble because all of this was on camera. He immediately called Park and told him about the murder, making it clear he needed his money by the next day because he was heading to China in the morning. But Park didn't have a penny to his name, so he was left with one choice. He came up with a plan to deal with Jink. By the next morning, Dr. Sang-hun's car was all fixed. The mechanic was surprised. If a deer had hit their car, why was the bumper completely fine? Anyway, seeing the doctor's mood, the mechanic quickly changed the subject, saying maybe the deer just bounced off. Sang-hun had no idea what actually happened, so he quickly grabbed the footage from the trash can, the dash cam memory. As the footage played, his mind went blank. Someone had thrown a body off the bridge onto his car, and the person behind it was none other than that scrap dealer, Kyok-nam, who had already squeezed 20 million won from him. He immediately told Ju-yeon about it. Then the two of them decided to go to the police. Sang-hun had just parked his car and was about to get into Ju-yeon's car when someone hit him from behind and knocked him out. Turns out Kyok-nam and Ju-yeon had been working together all along. Sang-hun had become a threat to them. With the police around, they couldn't head to the nearby mountain, so they decided to take him to their village, completely unaware that someone was following them. In their village, there was an old building no one ever went to. They began digging Sang-hun's grave behind the building. After a while, when Sang-hun came to, the betrayal by Ju-yeon was too much to bear. Without thinking, he rammed his car into hers, ending her story for good. But in the next moment, Kyok-nam took care of him too. Kyok-nam's sins had finally caught up with him, and the end was near. The story then takes us back to when Ju-yeon was in college. There was a school festival coming up, and they needed to create a promotional pamphlet. The decision was made to put the school topper, Lee Yu-jong's photo, on the cover. Lee Yu-jong didn't mind, but Ju-yeon couldn't stand it because she had also been a strong contender for the cover. To get revenge for the insult, she tricked Lee Yu-jong into meeting her at a restaurant. There, her three masked accomplices did something to Lee Yu-jong that would leave a permanent scar on her for life. 10 years later, Lee Yu-jong had become a skilled doctor, but that incident still haunted her like a nightmare. Meanwhile, a fire had broken out in the abandoned building in the village. The firefighters found a body inside that had been completely burned. Then near the stairs, they discovered another person whose breath was still faint. Dr. Yoon and Lee Yu-jong did everything they could. In the end, they managed to save him. When the doctor asked, the man introduced himself as Park Jae-young. As soon as Lee Yu-jong heard the name, she was struck with a thought. This person had to be connected to Dr. Lee in some way. However, when her boyfriend Yoon asked her about it, she didn't say a word. The pain was eating her up inside, and her anger was visible in her eyes. To find some peace, she decided to hire a detective agency. She needed to track down the 4 people who had hurt her 10 years ago. The story then goes back 10 years, showing Dr. Lee with Park Jae-young. Thanks to Ju-yeon, they were on their first date. It was late at night when 2 masked men attacked them. After the incident, the police called in 3 boys for identification, the ones they suspected. One of them was Park Jae-young. Lee was shocked to see him because he seemed innocent, but the police told her that the entire plan had been his. By then, Detective Han had tracked down the 4 of them. 3 of them had already paid the price for their actions, and the 4th was in room 402 of Lee's hospital. Despite being severely injured, he was still laughing, which seemed strange. Then the local police arrived to question him about the incident. "What were you doing in that abandoned building?" they asked. Park replied that he had been forced to go there. When he opened his eyes, he saw two men fighting. Then one of them poured gasoline all over and set the place on fire. After that, Park couldn't remember anything. His fingers were completely burned in the fire, so it was impossible to identify him for now. With Park's return, Lee's old wound had been reopened. She thought about ending him to put this pain to rest once and for all, but she couldn't do it, and Park recovered and went back home. On the way, he kept talking to himself, wondering where he had gone wrong. After burying Ju Yeon and Dr. Sang-hun properly, he had thought he'd get away easily. Meanwhile, Sang-hun's wife was causing a lot of trouble trying to expose his affair, pushing Mr. Han in all directions. Although Han had gathered a lot of evidence, he was still looking for something solid. He reassured her that their work would be done soon. Just then, two of Mr. Han's detectives came running to him, both visibly shaken, because things had gotten a bit out of hand. They had been following Dr. Sang-hun to gather evidence, and they had witnessed the entire event with their own eyes. They even had pictures to prove it. 10 hours before the fire in the building, at 8 p.m. that night, Park had sent an address to Jink to pay him the money. Jink was sure that Park would try to do something shady, so he asked his friend Kyeok Nam for help. The two of them had met in prison. Kyeok Nam was about to be released after 2 years, so before leaving, he shared his prison belongings with his friends. Outside the prison, he ran into Ju Yeon. They were both scammers, working together to rob people. Ju Yeon would date guys, trap them, and Kyeok Nam would play the role of her brother, showing up at the wrong time to create a scene. They'd then scare the guys with threats of the police and extort a lot of money. In some cases, they even blackmailed older men for cash. Their next target was Dr. Sang-hun. Ju Yeon was busy seducing him, while Kyeok Nam was out handling another job, getting the full 150 million won. Jink had helped identify that Park guy, the one who had paid to have his own father killed. Coincidentally, Kyeok Nam already knew him. Both had gone to the same college, though Park was 3 years younger. The night was getting late. Meanwhile, Park's father was returning home from church, completely unaware that someone was out to take his life. Seizing the right moment, they rammed their car into Park's father. When that didn't do the job, they shifted the car into reverse and hit him again. As Jink got out of the car, he heard someone whispering. He immediately ran in the direction of the sound, but whoever it was had already fled. Park's father was still alive. If they left him there, things could get messy. Plus, they needed to make it look like an accident for the insurance claim. On the other hand, Ju Yeon was making things difficult for Sang-hun, trying to rob him. That's when the light bulb went off in Kyeok Nam's head. He took the blame onto himself and got Jink out of the car. Then he explained the whole plan to Ju Yeon. This was the whole setup to trap Dr. Sang-hun. Now the next step was to get the money from Park, but Kyeok Nam couldn't understand why Jink was suddenly so desperate to get back to China. Jink stayed silent while the police had already reached his hideout. There, they found Park's father's government ID. Meanwhile, Park arrived at the spot and was planning to take care of Jink. Just then, he showed up. Park was playing hard to get, saying he'd pay him later. In the process, he got stuck at a police checkpoint. The police were actually looking for a man who had committed 2 murders a few days ago. As soon as Jink saw the pamphlet, he recognized the man. He was right behind them, but seeing the situation, he left his car in the middle of the road and ran off. The police were on the move, and Park was heading toward the old abandoned building in his village. Jink thought maybe the money was hidden somewhere else, so he followed Park there. But in reality, the money was in the car's trunk. To his surprise, the whole bag was filled with paper. Park saw his chance and tried to attack Jink, but his move backfired because Jink had already seen him practicing with a hammer and was ready for him. After that, Jink called Kyeok Nam over. By then, Kyeok Nam had seen the news and knew his face was all over it. There was no way out for him now. Then Park had an idea. Both of them looked similar in height, build, and features. Without wasting any time, he took out Jink. Because if Jink got caught by the police, Kyeok Nam's plan would be ruined. So he made Park wear his clothes. Park kept begging, pleading for his life, but Kyeok Nam didn't listen. He ended his story right there so that Park could live his life. Up until this point, everything seemed fine. But then, the cylinder exploded and Kyeok Nam ended up caught in it. In a way, this accident worked out in his favor. The police easily accepted that he was Park Jae-young. Meanwhile, after all these years, Dr. Lee became more restless. When Yoon asked her about it, she finally had to come clean. She admitted that as long as she didn't put an end to him, her heart wouldn't find peace. The next evening, as Kyeok Nam was returning home, Dr. Lee stopped him. Kyeok Nam tried to explain that he wasn't Park and that she should stop following him, But Lee wasn't ready to listen. Just then, Kyoknam started feeling dizzy and suddenly collapsed to the ground. But this wasn't just a coincidence. It was part of the plan. Lee had switched his pain medication. For Lee, this was the perfect opportunity. As she pulled out a knife to kill him, Yoon arrived just in time. He tried to talk her out of it, saying that doing this would ruin their lives. After much convincing, she finally agreed. But before leaving, she vented all her anger on Park. Meanwhile, the police started doubting Park's statement. He had said that he was tied to a chair, but the person found near the chair was already dead. It could take 2 weeks or maybe even a month for the DNA report to come through. So the police quickly took action to catch Park. On their way, they even called him to track his location. But by then, Park had become cautious. While looking for his passport to escape, he found a pamphlet. It triggered old memories. Actually, to teach Lee a lesson, Ju-yeon had gone straight to Kyoknam first. He had just gotten out of jail and didn't want to make any reckless moves. There were no other guys at school who could do Ju-yeon's dirty work. That's when Kyoknam came up with the plan. It turned out Kyoknam was the biggest culprit in all of this. Now he finally understood why Dr. Lee had washed her hands and gone behind the Park. A little while later, the cops showed up at his place. But by then, he had already run off to the bus station. It had been exactly 30 days since the deadline to return the money, but he still couldn't figure out what this new notification was all about. And just then, some guys showed up and kidnapped him. On the other side, we see Dr. Yoon, whose identity was verified, and the door was open for him. He used to take night shifts now and then to make some extra cash, but tonight was his last visit. He had paid off all his debts. Now he had enough money to buy a house and marry Lee. Even his boss fully supported his decision. Later, when Yoon went to work, the victim looked kind of familiar. He pulled off the mask and was shocked. It was the same guy who had ruined his girlfriend Lee's life. That's what you call karma. What goes around, comes around. Yoon usually knocked out his victims before getting to work. But with Kyoknam, he didn't show a shred of mercy.